Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Worship Guitar Show. Let's see if I can get a little less orange. How about that? Boy, did we have a little color shift there. Okay, well, first of all, it's great to see you. Wonderful to be here for another Worship Guitar Show. The interesting thing about this blue is watch what happens when I do this. It does a really interesting thing with the color shift. So that will kind of help us with the orange factor. No, I have not been at a tanning salon. So tonight's topic, no, is not about tanning salons, although that could fit in there. It is about the concept of, is there too much tech? There's an interesting thing that happened over the past while. I've been spending a lot of time in technology, working with different pieces of gear, working with different pieces of technology all the time. And, it is just a constant thing where tech is constantly in my face, ringing my doorbell. And it is just kind of everywhere that I am. Good, good, good. We're live. Hello, everybody. Do me a favor, if you get a moment, type in the chat where you're coming from and let me know. Does tech have you down? Or are you digging tech? And I say this because of the following. This t-shirt is the perfect example. Bruce, the publisher at Worship Musician, and I had a chuckle about this whole concept of the idea of, hey, what happens when, we have this generation of people that grew up with record players interfacing with all this crazy technology. Like this is an amazing piece of technology. It is basically a wireless Bluetooth controller. You can change channels on your amp. You can change, presets on your multi-effects. You can control YouTube with it. But at the same time, an interesting thing happened today in the midst of all of this is that I got a message from a guy. There was something that I had the privilege of being involved in. Hey, Chris. First of all, Bruce, hello. Thanks. Glad you like the shirt, Bruce. And Chris, great to see you, my friend. Always a pleasure. So I got the Line 6 guys reached out to myself and Worship Tutorials to put together some content for worship musicians when they buy a Helix from Sweetwater. And so I got an email from one of the people that had bought actually an HX Stomp, and the course is technically for regular full size Helix, but this guy had just kind of onboarded with HX Stomp because that was what they could afford, which I absolutely love. So, great to see you, Alan. Welcome aboard, my friend. So, he sent me a very long message that really got to the heart of where I've been thinking about things. It's like, imagine if you came into technology today and you came from, if you will, the record player generation. All of a sudden, there's all this stuff to on ramp and to digest and to onboard. How do we actually make sense of that? So, the bigger question that I've got for you again is, does tech or is tech getting you down? I would love to know that, and feel free to chime in and jangle on about that. Or else I will continue on with the belief that you are so inspired to hear me talk a little bit more about this whole concept. So here's the thing. As it relates to us as guitar players, I've got an old amp that I bought a speaker cabinet for, and I spent some time last night at the very end of the day unpacking the speaker cabinet, plugging in the amp head, and plugging the guitar straight into the amp. And I just kind of like had this experience. I'm like, and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of all the stuff. Like, if you look around me, ironically, there and there and here, I am surrounded by the technology. But at the same time, I was not, I wasn't missing the fact that when I just plugged into the amp, I'm like, there is that thing. And so I'm kind of curious if anybody else is feeling that same way. Not everybody at once, mind you. But I'm going to do the dangerous thing here. Let me see if I can open up the chat over here. Oh, there we go. Uh, okay, this stuff's not floating in, so I'll have to make sure I keep an eye on this. So first of all, Brett, great to see you. Forrest, great to see you as well. Speaking of tech, I see you're doing NAMM tech stuff. I am. So I'm doing, technically it's a tech track, but it is on, no, it's not technically it's a tech track. It's on technology and creativity, which, you know what, since you kindly opened the door there, I will gleefully go there once we, kind of exhaust any questions. So first of all, thank you for that. All right, Chris Alexander. It seems one could miss out from enjoying playing, spending a lot of time figuring out something new. So this is the interesting thing is that there is a certain amount of peer pressure to kind of roll with whatever it is that's popular, which I certainly understand because we want to be relevant in the framework of our worship teams. We don't necessarily want to show up with a Marshall stack and no way to kind of attenuate the sound. I will kind of fess up the piece of gear that I bought was a vintage Marshall cabinet because I just kind of lost my mind. I was like, I've got to have one. And so I was plugging, a buddy of mine had loaned me a couple of vintage Marshall heads, like that amp right there. And I kind of plugged into this amp head and the cabinet, and I was just like, that is the thing that pretty much some version thereof everybody wants. And in case you didn't know, the early Marshalls were really just Fender Bassman amps. And the early Fender Bassmans were really just kind of, there were all these guys that were in the U.S. Armed Forces that kind of tinkered with radio. And so they basically took all this radio tube technology and amplification, and they started making stuff for guys and gals to plug into and have their musical way with this gear. And so the lineage is actually, I spent some time today, hours in tech hell, negotiating an application and a series of interrelated things where it just didn't quite want to behave. And I'm, the interesting thing, I love the learning process. I love the technology. So I do have to do the big reveal. But I'm also aware of just like with the amount of time I spend immersed in it. It's like there was an ad that I saw for a film school where basically the guy comes up and hits this guy's hat off and says, "Stop shopping for gear and actually start studying and making films." So the interesting thing is that I spend so much time studying. In many ways, I spend more time studying and learning the craft than I actually do executing that. And there is a danger to that. But there's also the benefit that your knowledge grows. So with that said, there we go. I'm going to dig in here. I dig my Pod Go for convenience and quick setup. Part of me still loves dragging out my heads and cabs. I just play. Hands, wood wire. So there is something that happened when I plugged into that amp. And I went. The reason I mentioned this kind of this Fender and the military and radios and tubes and all of that lineage of those early amplifiers, Stevie Ray, Jimmy, the kind of the iconic guitar players, Clapton, that really kind of brought us to that sound where loud rock guitar. Because when we do worship, we do in theory like to have some loud rock guitar. I mean, if we're going to be really honest. So kind of going back and like, oh, there's the jangle. And I had the chairwoman of the board come down this morning, and I just spent some time. I was like, hey, I want you to hear this. And she was like, yeah, that sounds really good. Like she's got a great ear, but she's not necessarily, if I played a Les Paul or a Strat, she'd recognize the guitar visually, but she may not necessarily recognize the sound. I think she'd pick out a Strat at this point. But if I were playing a Strat or a Tele, then she may not necessarily hear that. But she kind of went, yeah. And it's just one of those things where you plug in and it's like, there is the guitar, a cable, the head, and the cabinet, and tone. Something really, 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 really connective about that. And again, at the same time, I spent, once the technology was behaving, all that stuff inside the box, because ultimately, the music that we so love ultimately had to use technology to get captured, to get stuck on this piece of vinyl or a cassette or a CD or an MP3 or a WAV file or an AIFF. So it's just an interesting journey that we have to negotiate. We can't escape it, but it's interesting. Western Electric and RCA 2 manuals would give you the circuit design for two they wanted to sell. Leona was no dummy. That's right. So thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. Boom. So hey, NTPL, welcome. I've been working out of town for 2 months now and bought a Strymon Iridium to come out. And man, do I miss the experience of my hand-wired tube amp. Definitely can relate. So again, nothing wrong with the like, hey, it is better than if you're if you were in a hotel room. Hotel rooms actually, I will say this, hotel room practice is actually kind of cool, but there is something incredibly transitory about a hotel where you're like, you just know by the environment. It's kind of like a green room, right? Nobody lives in the green room. Nobody's office is in the green room. The green room is there for pretty much one purpose only: wait. So I love it. Welcome, NTPL. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, let's see if we've got a little something going on over here in the Book of Face. Oh, look at all this stuff. Great, 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 great. What's going on, Steve? Welcome, my friend. Brett. And awesome, awesome. So, yeah, hang on. Why are you bunching up there like that? There we go. All right, Brett. Yes, I truly love the simplicity of going direct into an amp and just playing with the tone inspires. It was a fascinating thing because it we did a tech track, and I will come back to this whole tech track thing because I think, again, we want to be contemporary, but at the same time, what I love about this is that there are different versions of contemporary. This contemporary, I've still got stacks of records. Um, I still have CDs, although I don't really listen to them. But from time to time, I will pull out those records, and there's something about the smell of, they don't smell great, the after they've sat around for a couple of decades. But there's something about the smell of the jacket, and you pull out the vinyl, it's definitely got a smell. And there's something about putting that down. There's a connection. There's a tactile, and I think it's probably why people enjoy texting so much. I think if people didn't have that tactile sense about that thing, I think we like to touch. Um, and I was just amazed at that tactile responsiveness. Now, I am also spending some time in the midst of all of this doing some demo work around a brand new product from Celestion called Speaker Mix Pro, which is the idea is taking that next generation of impulse responses and making them such that they have this tactile interaction. The same thing about the Bosch GT1000 core. They have figured out some algorithmic things about that interaction between the amplifier, the impedance of the speaker cabinet, and then as sound is traveling back and forth between. Uh, I'll put that one up. Hang on a second. There we go. Uh, uh, Boom. And I'm going to come back to you in just a moment, Alan. But the idea is that they are getting at the point where they're figuring out some of that thing that happens where the signal begins to do this little interactive thing between the amp and the cabinet, and the cabinet and the amp, where they're talking to each other. And ultimately, when you play, you can feel that information being translated into the way the guitar interacts with the signal, which is one of one of the things that, in particular, when you play with an all-in-ear setup, you lose that interaction of the guitar hearing the amplifier, which is one of the reasons, if you can get away with it, placing an amp or cabinet off to the side of the stage, preferably angled up, so it's not going to drive anybody crazy, and it's not going to be in the worship leaders' mics, or something on the floor that's preferably closed back, again leaning up directly towards you, such that the guitar can hear a little bit of itself because it begins to behave and bloom, and bloom being the operative word, that is an important factor. So let me jump up to Alan's comment. Um, well, and so this is the interesting thing is that the let's use 4K television as an example. Alan, I'm not going to guess. I'm just going to presume that you are a bit younger than I am, but I was born in the earlier part of the 60s, and black and white television, no cable. You had like three channels. There was arguably more to watch then than there is now. But the point being is we had this experience that has continued to evolve, and it's gotten better. So, I actually am a huge fan of the modeling technology. The application that I spent my day working with is something. The idea, the concept of it is that it's a standalone application. It's called Gig Performer, and enables you to use all your studio plugins in a live setting. Uh, but kind of one of the things that's happening is that uh, hang on a second. Wait, no, where is that? I saw that coming. There we go. I love it. Come on. Actually, the funny thing is, in my house, we had a remote control. And we discovered if you went, Cha! It would change the channels automatically. Love that. Um, so the idea is the technology is gotten much better, and the idea of this gig performer is you don't have to have anything but potentially a laptop, and you can run your studio plugins, which is really kind of neat. And again, that's kind of where I alluded to a moment ago, was that there is a lot of magic that happens in the studio, and even in the old days. I must admit, I was reading somewhere something about Brian Wilson, and I'm not necessarily the biggest Brian Wilson fan or Beach Boys. I was kind of more like a Beatles kind of guy, but the thing is that there's this song Little Surfer, and so I've just kind of so I've been working on it, so like let me play that, and I've just had it looping because the production and like the ride is off there in this lovely bed of reverb. The bass every so do 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 do, it's like up P bass, and the snare drum. There's actually one spot where I'm pretty sure they miss like two or four within the first 4 or 8 measures. It's like there just is no snare, but the vocal production is just like, and it's just like you're just kind of like, I am actually getting goosebumps, because the production when it is a production where it's producing something, it takes it somewhere. And in a sense, I think that's the heart of what we're talking about is that there is something very special when you take a vintage Marshall. And I must admit, I kind of started going like, well, how would it sound with a wah-wah in front? Or how about maybe with a King of Tone? So I started adding a little bit of production to that process. And so modeling is in many ways taking a snapshot of that produced process, which is honestly incredibly awesome and incredibly powerful and increasingly affordable. But I felt really badly for this lovely guy that showed up in my on my Facebook. He direct messaged me, and I was like, oh, this is long. But he was like, I really, I want to understand it, but it's so much. And I think what I really wanted to get at was I was curious to see how many of the other folks here, because the interesting thing is on my other show, my mainstream show, which is now Saturdays at 9 a.m. Uh, YouTube.com/Doug Doppler, Facebook.com/Doug Doppler official. If you're not doing anything on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific, but we were talking about kind of all this crazy new technology in this past episode. And so, the thing is that I love the tech, but at the same time, I'm also aware of. I've got a student, plays at church. His name's Eric. Love him. And he comes on here. Um, Eric Martin Bureau. And I met him at one of teaching. He was he was at the Vi camp, I think. And he is, first of all, a fine guitar player, but he is not yet into the recording world. And I was thinking, as because I basically am working between two different machines, a new machine, that at first it was being a little funny when I added, by the way, Waves installers, the worst. Just saying it. Um, but kind of getting things set up on the new machine, then realizing I needed to go from a second machine into the new machine and get them to talk to each other, and then get rid of the latency, and then just like I was like, I don't necessarily know when or how I learned all the thousand steps that were involved in thinking about that. But if I were at the beginning of that process, I would have been not happy. And so the point being is like that giant buffer of technology between you and just playing the guitar. I got to tell you, after spending hours last night doing that and spending hours today, that simplicity of plugging into the amp is awfully appealing. And I think there's the convenience of technology, and we have friends that are on the mixing side of things. And they certainly know the idea of like, hey, the better it is going into the board, because an amp can be a little persnickety to capture sometimes, especially if your volunteer team isn't great at kind of knowing how to capture that. All right, let me just see here real quick. There we go. All right. like it works. That's so funny. It's a really interesting thing. So like and who says we don't talk about more than guitar here? So the first part of my day, I kind of do this thing where I put on my spiritual armor and I come down here and I open up Bible Gateway. It is digitally convenient, but I think, and here's the thing: is the convenience of it. It's a lot easier to set up a Pod Go than drag a 412 cabinet ahead and then be told you got to put it in the back room and get a Torpedo Captor X and be able to use it like that. Which honestly, they sound really great with the Marshall, and they've got a 16 ohm version now. So, but yes, that tactile sense is really cool. I have 9,000 songs in my iPod, and I still can't find something I want to listen to at times. That my solution is I just listen to the same song over and over. So like I get into a vibe, and the other thing is I love to have music. And by the way, just since we're there, let's take a moment and let's talk about some of the ways that I do love technology. For example, without that camera and without that virtual webcam and without Ecamm Live and without Restream, I wouldn't be kind of hanging out with you on Facebook and YouTube. I realize that's obvious, but there are, obviously we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are a lot of benefits that the technology has. I think the challenge is identifying kind of where is it in the way and when's it helping and when's it not helping. If as a guitar player I show up and I play too loud, okay, I'll make it a better example. I don't think anybody likes the sound of electronic drums. I think maybe the people at the manufacturing companies that make them, I think they have convinced them that they are a worthy product in the marketplace, which they are, and they've consistently made them better. But I don't necessarily believe that any one of them, if they had a choice of sitting down at a real drum kit, would prefer to have the electronic experience. I really, really, really doubt that. Um, so the point being is that we are cloaked in this kind of like, at what point do we choose the technology over the analog, and at what point do we choose the analog over the technology? And I think we don't spend as much time really in the nuts and bolts of what that looks like. For example, uh, the idea of getting let's say a vocal blend. Let's pick on the vocalist. Let's pick on somebody else for a minute, and I'm going to have a little drink of my water here. All right, so for example, let's make the analogy that your vocalists are like your guitar strings. Really helps if they're in tune with one another, such that when they make sound at the same time, they actually are relationally in tune. Vocal blends, and it's as if you were hitting with, you grew a sixth finger and you're plucking at different volumes, and there are times you want to play with different volumes. But when vocalists don't know how to develop a blend, they lose that thing. And I was talking with somebody. I have another student that again, he's like, hey, I'm getting close to the point where once this COVID thing is over, I could use some help. I'm going to pay for he uh, pay for outfitting a rehearsal space, and in this rehearsal space, he wants everything to be on in ears. Um, and the conversation was about kind of all the pieces of that. And in the midst of that conversation, I kind of mentioned, and he mentioned, he said it just very innocently, but basically, everybody just turns their fader up a little bit more than everybody else's, which is important because you do want to be able to hear yourself when you're singing. You actually hear the sound of, like, if you kind of just put your hands on your cheeks, or you put your hand in front of your mouth, you hear the sound coming out that reverberates inside your skull. So there is some natural volume there. Uh, but traditionally, what people do is they just pull their fader up, and then everybody else is quieter. That's not a great way to get a blend. And usually, there's not somebody on the team going, "Hey, pan things to the left and the right." Maybe even the person that's on your right, pan them to the right, and the person that's on your left, pan them to your left. Just like, wow, never thought of that. And then try and get that sense of singing together as opposed to like we're singing at the same time. So the point being is that the technology, I can think of a really great example of, yes, it's really nice that everybody's on the click and that we play in time, and that the drummer is now, kind of being forced to, potentially play with electronic drums. But it would be arguably, with the exception of running tracks, but imagine a band that, and it's interesting because lots and lots of people are moving towards in-ears. Mind you, one of the main reasons they do that is because more and more people are using stuff that's running in the background that they kind of need to be able to hear it. One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the, and protecting your hearing versus a drummer that's bashing away on cymbals. But the idea of an ensemble actually playing and listening to each other, not through the technology, I think we've moved further away from that. And honestly, I think we've paid a price for it musically and culturally. Okay, let's see here. Let me just take a moment and jump in. Here we go. Hey, Brett. Okay, yes, when you go from playing modeling for so long and then plug into a real analog amp, it's like, wow. I don't want to return sometimes. It's a relationship with an amp that just doesn't translate digitally. And, the interesting thing is all the convenience of being able to, I press a button and my entire rig changed. I've now got this amp model, I've got this speaker IR, and, boom, press another button. Now, and I go to the next song and it's already, beat sync to the right tempo of the song because I input that into programming. There is some very wonderful and special stuff that happens in that space that without the technology we wouldn't have the benefit of that. But at times, my favorite worship experiences have not been when it's loud and banging, but actually with acoustic. And much of the time that has been actually just sometimes with just a pair of wedges in the front so the vocalists could hear themselves with keys, but they were forced to actually blend together. And as an ensemble, we were forced to keep time on our own and listen to each other and play listening to one another. And that's musicality. And again, there are times the technology becomes a crutch, and there are times the technology becomes an enabler. It's an interesting dichotomy there. Uh, there we go. That's so funny. Love it. Uh, Gee, the Fender tone. So it's an interesting thing because I'll take that bait. So you know, here. Okay, so this is, if we were in a day and age where people actually read stuff um, consistently as a culture. That's a great example. I actually literally today uh, purchased that amplifier. Um, I have that, and that's just a regular deluxe there, but the matching black face deluxe to that one. One of these days, I'm going to learn. Right, that's my right side, so that's the matching black face to that one, which is a year back. I own both of those amps, so I can use them in stereo. What's really neat is that they, first of all, they sound amazing. They weigh like, you could, like, lie in bed and just do presses with them. They sound unreal. And actually the funny thing is I'm gonna do so I'm getting ready to do a bunch of fun YouTube stuff. So it'll be like taking a vintage tube screamer and a modern tube screamer and just go, okay, they may sound the difference. They may sound different. Can you tell which one is which? Can you tell which one is which? And which one do you like the sound of? If you do, and you obviously have to kind of get the settings in the sweet spot. So it may not be a matter of like I'm going to turn the knobs to the exact same position. That is not always necessarily fair because maybe the pots have a different, I don't know, whatever, and the parts are going to be different. But when you get them into the zone, go, all right, which one is which, and which one, or which one do you like better, and which one is which? And there are times you kind of go, oh, and then the same thing is going to be, it's like, all right, well, here is the Alnico blue, and here's the green. Which one do you like better? All right, here's the Tone Master Deluxe and just a regular Deluxe reverb. Can you tell the difference? And if you can, which one do you like better? And so the thing is that this Deluxe reverb here, uh, I had the privilege of being in a Vertex Effects video that came out yesterday, and it's been really well received. And it was going back and forth between that and actually a Two Notes torpedo cab, right? They're small kind of pedal board thing. So they were doing between back and forth between that amp, and kind of a speaker slash amp emulation, both of which sounded really good. I was kind of like, I don't know which I like better, but I will say that I spent $400 kind of making that amp go from kind of being kind of plain Jane to like a great sounding amp, and it's a great sounding amp now. But like the great thing about that amp, I'll never have to change a tube. It weighs, it literally weighs about 5 or 6 pounds, 10 at the most. But out of the back, there is the ability to go direct out with this one's got the 421, the 57, or no amp modeling, or no cabinet modeling, or microphone modeling. So you can then basically load your own IR. The other one, instead of having the 421, has got the Royer 421, Royer 121. Sorry, the old one, 57, Shure SM57, Royer 121, or no, nothing loaded, and you can choose which of those three. The new one, you can have your choice of an SM57, a 421, or again, nothing loaded. So because I'm a bit of a stereo nut, the ability to have kind of the ability to mix and match that in a single pass and have it be quiet and have it be in stereo and have the circuits, really sound great and be able to use different plugins or different IRs. Again, as I get enamored about the technology, but there the technology is serving one of the most important things, which is I've got an amp. That guy right there in that studio, I purposely took it because we knew that we were going for a particular thing. It was basically Mason has this pedal called the Steel String Supreme that's on a board over there. It's a great sounding pedal. It's basically modeled after a Steel String Singer, but it doesn't have any cab emulation. So you need to use some sort of cabinet and amplifier to get it to kind of come to life. So what we did was we brought that amp down, and just like we turned that sucker up, and we were like, oh yeah. And I was reminded about how much, again, I enjoyed, there was pedal board there, but how much I enjoyed just turning an amp up. I'm going, there it is, the guitar is hearing the amp in the room. In any case, all right, let's see here. I was a channel changer at my house. I love it. There we go. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing. Um, the technology, for example, CNC. Somebody actually, I've got a reply to it. Somebody put up a message on a YouTube video that I posted, and their comment was, that Fender, doesn't do quarter saw necks anymore, and they were kind of going off, and so I wanted to take a look and some of my production guitars, and first of all, For anybody that doesn't know what a quarter saw neck is, somebody's making a delivery. If your fingerboard is like that, a quarter saw neck is done in such a way that the wood grain is kind of standing up, if you will. It will make for a firmer neck. Now, that does not necessarily mean it's going to sound any better. But they kind of really went off, and the thing is that people are absolutely entitled to their opinion, but it was a micro rant. It was interesting. How are you going, Forrest Gump? I'm at the laundromat watching on my phone. Sorry, I thought you were at the laundromat watching the sweater go around. Uh, that is my point. It's just like, oh come on, click. There we go. That I mean that's kind of it. Like wow, it is. We are connected, and through the technology we can connect. The thing again, getting back to the IEMs, which are they can really be a huge benefit because a team that can't play on its in time and keep a groove without a click, or arguably having the benefit of a click to get a team in time, lots of benefits. But at the same time, quite frequently you don't train a team to. A team that sounds great is more often the product of the talent than the blend capacity. Talented people learn how to blend, but the it's a different skill set of showing up and singing your part at the right place in the right time. The next, all right, let's take that stuff off our heads. What are you singing there? Where's your dynamics? It's a different thing. Nothing can replace rehearsal. It's just amazing, where it's at, and the interesting thing is that I literally had this conversation with an amp buddy of mine, works for a big amp company yesterday on Zoom, no less, and I was like, because one of the things that we talked about is kind of what the virtual version of training begins to look like. I'm always passionate about the idea of why is my input so low? I'm always passionate about the idea of using technology to help people grow in their craft. So the sort of some of the stuff we're talking about with online training is pretty darn exciting. All right, Leighton, I saw you pop in there before. I thought the biggest change to practice and playing has been the introduction of tabs. I never had tabs when I was learning in the late 70s. Music books of every gender and so much. So that is, and so it's an interesting. I will take that bait and then some. I'm going to leave that one up. And so I'm going to need a sip before that. Let's separate the truth and the myth. Leighton, once you ended up getting some of those books, we quickly discovered that. Well, I'll tell you the dirty secret of a lot of those guitar books is, first of all, I'll be generous and say a fifth of the transcriptions are not location accurate on the neck, and the challenge is the only way you can make any money in that business was to do as many books as quickly as you possibly could. If you actually did them at the pace that a traditional music educator would do tablature for a kid that comes up, where you're like, I don't want this kid playing this wrong. And the reality is not everybody has the ability to hear the difference between an A power chord at the fifth fret playing A and E with the first and third fingers on the sixth and fifth strings, and an open A chord at the open fifth string and the first finger playing the E at the second fret on the D string. Now that's a pretty obvious difference, but there are people that can't hear that. Those people are generally not transcribing. But when you take that concept and you take that to a run, where does that run start? Where does that run stop? If you've learned the caged version of the modes versus the 3 note per string version of the modes, you're going to write a fingering based on your knowledge, most likely. Not exclusively, but you just kind of you play out of your playbook. It's what you know. But that's different than like, oh, they're here, and I can hear that this note is played on this string. Because if you sit there, and I will give you a little bit of hear work when you're next in front of your instrument. I'd like you to spend some time listening to the difference between the E at the seventh fret on the A string and the E at the second fret on the D string, and start to play unison notes at different strings, and really you'll be able to hear it not only because you're seeing it and touching it, but you'll begin to kind of go, you know what? I can definitely hear that. And you'll begin to hear the nuance of that when you're listening to somebody else's playing. It's like, you know what? They're not playing that on the fifth string, or they're not down there in the open position. They're up here. And there's that nuance of just being able to listen to something. And here's the interesting thing. It's one of the I love watching other guitar players' live streams because I'm always curious to know how people learned. So I asked Pete Thorne on one of his Sunday live streams. I said, Pete, did you learn by playing songs, or did you kind of have a music teacher that taught you a bunch of theory? And this, and I kind of already had a pretty good idea. I'm like, this is a guy that grew up playing a million songs, that knew a million places on the neck to find where things are, right? And in the process of figuring out the songs, you learn the nuance of what that guitar player was thinking. So it gives you kind of the inside play, as opposed to, as you pointed out, Leighton, um, the idea is I'm going to read the cliff notes for this, versus kind of like, I kind of, there are songs that I go to play that, Cat Scratch Fever, More Than a Feeling, Smoke on the Water, that were things that I started, I figured out in seventh grade, which is a long time ago. But when I started getting to the point where I could actually kind of motor around the guitar well enough, I could hear some part of a song and pull that down. The interesting thing is that, somewhere between that and, if you think about that 4 years of development between then and, kind of 11th grade, which is when right around the completion of, that was somewhere right around the time I started studying with Joe Satriani, 11th grade. So the development that happened after that, especially, like, you kind of go from like, I can barely play, Catch Scratch Fever, to all of a sudden I'm like playing 3-note string modes, and I'm tapping and doing some arpeggios too, and I can play up and down the neck. It's like, it's a really interesting kind of like, it's kind of like being able to get inside Pro Tools and go, oh, well, the samples, I want to keep the buffer low, I want to be able to do this, and well, I want to set up a master fader, I want to set up aux buses, these are things that become part of your workflow. But when you're at the beginning of this thing, you're like, it's flipping Greek to me. Um, let's see here. All right. So many music books of of different past groups and Christian music too. Ultimate Guitar helps a lot. Awesome. I used to wear out a recording by trying to figure out the chords. No need anymore. Well, here's the benefit of that, Leighton. Obviously, but I'll speak to that because, first of all, awesome. The great thing about having to sit there and figure it out is you learn the skill of, like, one, the tab is 1/5 of it's wrong. It's in the wrong. It's in the wrong location. I've got a student. He's kind of my only kid that I'm teaching right now, and we were doing a Sum 41 song, and I was like, he's tuned down a half step, and he uses, I think, Ultimate Guitar, and there's another tab place that he goes to. Do I have those notes up? I don't. I make notes when I'm doing my lessons. But basically, the tab didn't notate that the guitar was tuned down a half step, and was just having him play it with some wacky fingering where it was really supposed to be kind of an open position A and a B, whatever the heck the song was, and it was just like, it was just wrong. And it wasn't notated, because usually on the site they notate, oh, if they're half step down, it mentions it. So this poor kid's flailing around, kind of doing the wrong thing, and he shows up for his lesson. I'm having a really hard time learning this thing. So the inaccuracy of that can really be a problem. So the point being is that developing of that ear is something that you'll take with you everywhere you go. Guitar Pro, love it. Uh, great tab tool. There we go. Yes, there you go, Chris. Uh, Paper in a stand. That's what I'm talking about. There is something about the skill of actually having a piece of paper in front of you and actually going, "This is my roadmap." Because one day you're going to go to use this thing or your iPad and the battery's going to die. You're going to be like, "Oh, you've had it happen." And then you've got the chart. And the idea is the chart. You can take it with you. I used to take my music with me to the gym, put it up on the treadmill when you go to the gym and do stuff like that, and just kind of listen to the music and just kind of have the chart there and count the number of times things happened, because you're first of all able to kind of look at that visual representation of the music. You're able to listen to the nuances, and you're able to have that kind of that experience that's happening at a number of different layers simultaneously, and it really kind of pulls you in there. And then you're able to make specific notes on the top of the chart, or flip the page over and like, oh, this is this, what they do in this particular time at the at the end of the song, when they get to the tag, they cut this piece off and they leave that out. That teaching point: passive listening, active listening. So, I would just encourage you to be very conscious of when you're using each of those and when you're not. For example, there are times that part of what I like to do is find where I'm at as I'm going to prepare a demo and just kind of feeling my way in there. But there are times where it just comes to like it's time to get the best possible performance, and there's a certain point where you just got to make it happen, right? Uh, uh, all right. Awesome. I didn't know about Guitar Instructor. Thanks for that, Chris. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Oh, that's awesome. Eddie Van Halen didn't have a problem with this Steinberger, so there you have it. There's nothing like having a tablet decide to update mid-service, and that happened twice. Can you imagine like everybody's tablets? It's like auto forced update. It's like, let's do the chorus again. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. All right, hang on a second. Let me find. Oh, it's being a little strange about this. What's the matter with that image on Facebook? I guess there's just a little bit of network congestion. All right. Um, okay. Good, Brett. All right. I really wish Fender would put an effects loop on this new amp. Seems strange to incorporate updates and technology without adding a loop. You know, I'm going to be the brand advocate, and then I'm also going to point out that the matchless I'm looking at over there, and the boogie that I'm looking at over there, which is really glorified Fender, and there was a Vox here that had an AC30, AC30 S1 had an effects loop. Lone Star, the the puritanical reason is that interaction between the preamp and the power amp. When you start putting stuff in there, you start affecting the flow of the communication between those two things, and you change the balance between the level of the preamp and the level of the input, whether it's too much or too little going into the power amp. So the purists would not want to interrupt that. And so, the interesting thing is that there has never been a Fender amplifier that's been popular that has an effects loop. Now that may be, and I'm going to have to ask because I've got some friends over at Fender. I'm going to ask them because that's a really interesting question and a great question and a worthy question. I can tell you the answer becomes a why factor is that generally Fenders, as we know and love them most, are low gain amplifiers. And yes, you can turn them up and get some drive, especially out of the tweeds. But more often than not, people like Stevie Ray or whatever are using, or Kenny Wayne Shepherd are using pedals into the front end, and that's a perfect place to place your pedal. By the way, Doppler's gear hack number one of the day. So one of the things you can do with a Fender amplifier, along the lines of what you're talking about, is to leverage the two channels and use one as your kind of your lead channel, the other is your kind of your Stevie Ray / Beautiful Clean channel that's got different stuff. So the idea is you use an AB box, and then you split one side that's going to go into basically the normal channel, and the other that would go into what is classically referred to as the vibrato channel, which in theory will also have the reverb on that. And that's the one you kind of use for more for your cleans and and your spatial stuff and your Stevie Ray stuff. And then the normal channel is where you put your distortion pedals. But you don't have to. But the point being is then also your delays. Not that you can't put it on the other one, but when you go for your higher gain stuff, that really enables you to manipulate that one channel that is not used for anything. So you can have it set at its own level. You can have your own specific effects chain that goes there after the AB box, and it basically makes great takes great advantage of the two channels of that amplifier. One of my favorite little hacks. All right. I really don't like how a delay sounds in front of and I really don't like how a delay in front of a clean amp sounds or behaves on a clean tone. Well, that is being the guy that spent many hours today messing with. If any of you have Universal Audio stuff or have been thinking about getting Universal Audio stuff, there is a plugin for one of the most amazing studio reverbs of all time, the Lexicon 224. And that reverb is unreal. And you wouldn't put that before your amplifier. So, the idea is that you want to take that and take the sound, capture it dry, and then surround it with that stuff. Now, the interesting thing I actually did with this one kind of Stevie Ray tone was I actually used a DBX 160 compressor into the front end of the virtual amp model, which was basically a blonde basement, into the Celestion Speaker Mix Pro, basically their DSR dynamic speaker responses, which basically like IRs on steroids, and then that kind of splits out. The direct signal goes into a mixer, and then the other signal goes out into the Lexicon reverb, which is running pirouette, and then you bring that into the other side of this virtual mixer, and then you blend them together. So it's basically treating your amplifier like, when Mason and I went into the studio there, you just kind of stick some stuff in front of it like a compressor, and then you stick whatever it is, once you've got that inside the box, then you can do stuff with it. And boy, putting that reverb, it's unreal. Yeah, so yes, technology is a many splendid thing. All right, let's see here. Yes, I've got a student that had a very kind of he had a warlock actually, and they didn't come up with that name by accident. So that's pretty funny. Uh, that's so funny. Uh, I don't know. Not I. I don't always see them. They kind of show up and drop stuff up on the porch, but they're good. They're good guys. Hello, David. How you doing? Good to see you. Doing well. Hope the same with you. Thanks for hanging out and saying hi. Uh, uh, Bruce. uh, That's funny. I think they would be fighting to not go here. It's like not again. Flip a coin. They may be flipping something other than a coin. Sweetwater has $200 bonus bucks when you buy Fender, Ventura, Tele, or Strat. I don't. I don't get paid. Just someone take advantage because I can't. That's awesome. Uh, Thanks for sharing that. That's cool. The Ventura stuff is cool. There's in and I don't know what's coming with this next week, but I can tell you, besides a custom shop offering, I believe the Ventura Telly is the only offering that they've got that has a Bixby. That is kind of like a stock non-custom shop dealio. Uh, I love it. I that goes back a ways, and I will ask about that question because that's also a great question. It's like, why don't you have an on off for it? I will tell you a couple of guesstimates. One, much of the time, it is something that will be kept on a pedal board, right? So if you think about your average pedal, there's no on or off. It's just kind of running off pedal power. Um, and I'm trying to think out loud, and I should know the answer to this. Where is my HX stop? I don't know for a fact that the HX stop has an on-off switch. And the other thing is by the time you multiply that by the umpteen million of these that they sell, that actually does bring up the cost of manufacturing. And I think the interesting thing is that people. It's a funny thing when they talk about manufacturers potentially cutting corners. There's cutting corners and just putting poopy stuff on there, plastic parts that break and whatnot. And then there's just trying to keep the cost down. I think there's a very fine line there. And I know that you're not attacking the boss guys because I know you dig that box there. But I think the idea is it's on your board. It is a little strange that it doesn't have an on off switch. But at the same time, it's a pedal board born device frequently. So maybe that was their thing. It's like, let's keep the price down, and that could be what they're thinking. Here's the thing: is that famous phrase, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." I think there's a certain amount with an old. There's a buddy of mine who's got a '60s Pro Reverb that's here that is actually the unsung hero of the Fender line. Everybody knows about the Deluxe. Everybody knows about the Super Reverb. The funny thing about the Super Reverb is like that was one of Stevie Ray's main amplifiers. But the funny thing is that it's in very, very few. Sorry, grabbing my thermo remote control there. Um, it's kind of funny that there are very, very few models of the Super Reverb. Stevie Ray played that all over the place, like kind of like all the blues guys at one point or another have played one. So it's kind of strange. But people know about that. The Pro Reverb though is basically that halfway spot between a deluxe reverb, which has 112 and is 22 watts, and the twin reverb, which is Alan, I bet you'll know. I think it's 80 watts, but the Pro is in the high 30s. I think 36 or something like that, and has two 12s. And it is the first of all the reverb on it is just unreal, and it just sounds great. But here's the thing: is like if it works, why fix it? And I think a great example of this, David. I don't know how old you are, but there was a period of time during the '80s where Fender was kind of making these, red knob twins and then the cyber twins and all this stuff. And, they were doing a bunch of things and none of those amps have remained kind of as the standard. So I think there's a lot to be said about sticking with the hits. I could say the same thing of acoustic manufacturers. Josh, what's going on? Tone King Imperial Mark II is perfect for all that. I literally just got one in. I'm smitten. That is so funny. Uh, what's going on, Josh? So I was on a text with I won't name drop. Somebody did this the other day, and I was just kind of like, you don't have to. But like, all of a sudden, I get this message. I'm like, so and so and so and so and so and so. I'm like, holy cow! How did I get messaged on this? And so they were talking about the Tone King. Tone King amplifiers, not the Tone King. There is the Tone King, who is a YouTube personality. But the funny thing is that they are supposed to be great American-inspired amplifiers, which I have yet to play one. I think I heard them at the LA Amp Show, which if you've never been to an amp show, it's kind of like the zoo, but it's kind of like that thing that happened, that one Star Trek, where they're kind of they're the caged animals of the zoo, and you kind of walk down. You're watching the amp zoo, so each person is in their room, and they've got amps, and it's about like 120 or 130 decibels in this hallway as you're walking down, because everybody's goal is to play at full volume in this hotel. In any case, so I got a chance to hear them. They were great sounding amplifiers, but I don't think I got a chance to play with them. Okay. Okay. So I am not the guy to answer that question, so I apologize if I missed it last week. Um, and that may be to somebody in the chat there, but if it's not, there's a guy named Chris Griffin, who is um, he's with Church of the Highlands, and he's one of my favorite guys. But he is a ridiculous guitar player, and there's a nice feature about him and Church of the Highlands in the upcoming issue of Worship Musician. But I can tell you about pickups, and I can tell you about uh, pulsonic cones. Um, but when it comes to bracing on Martin guitars, that is not my area of expertise. Um, Look at these guys, the stereo guys. That's so funny. I have a Falcon problem. uh, oh, there you go. I like that. What's going on, Bill? The shop does have an on and off, but I almost never remember it. Thank you, Bill. I should know that. Appreciate it. Rescued. Thank you. Oh, that's so funny. That's awesome. All right. Uh, well, it is a part that can fail. It is a part that adds expense. I will tell you one of the other reasons that you mightn't put it on there. It seems like a silly reason. It's probably not the reason, but when you traditionally turn something, power things on and off, they go that pop, right? So it is one way, especially knowing that people are increasingly putting stuff on with ears to keep people from getting blown up. Um, part no, which is noted. All right, let's see here. All right. So getting back to this is tech in the way part of this, you know, um, technology is failing me now. I said off. Ew. There we go. Praises for technology. The I think the recording process is probably one of the best musical uses of technology that we've got. It allows us to document what we're doing. All right, so let's do this. Let's do a. I'm gonna say all the things that a guitar player in the next 2 years will probably want to be able to execute with tech, to be able to be knowledgeable enough to manage most of the things that I think are going to be on a horizon. One, as I would suggest, endeavoring, ironically, given the conversation point, to know some MIDI, because MIDI is the equivalent today when you're using kind of a modern board. And again, let's use the HX Stomp and the GT1000 as the example. It used to be that if you had a traditional pedal board, you would have to turn 5 things on and 5 things off, or some combination thereof, and your channel foot switch and all of that stuff. And it used to be okay, I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. Thank you. Um, the used to be that you would have to do this pedal board tap dance, and then switchers and loop controllers where you kind of have each effect in a loop that you can turn on or off, and then in turn you have some sort of master control that's telling those loops, all right, for this preset or patch, these loops are on or these loops are off. But one of the other things is that in that scenario, for something like a Timeline or a Big Sky or HX Stomp or GT1000, in turn having the ability to manipulate through MIDI which patch you're pulling up, and pulling those different things up simultaneously, having an understanding of MIDI, which honestly initially seems really, really scary, but it's not. Once you understand it conceptually, it's kind of like the difference between having little bunny ears that were on top of the television. And actually, I know I'm speaking to a bunch of you guys that were like the folks like me that's like set up the VCRs for our folks, because our folks they just didn't have the frame of reference to be able to understand that the VCR basically has a video cable, an audio left, and an audio right cable. That's pretty much all that's coming out of there. And quite often there was just one cable. It's called a coax, kind of like the little point in the center there, that could kind of carry all that stuff. But conceptually, the idea of an antenna that just basically pulled the signal down from the air and fed it to that, versus a VCR that you had to actually take stereo audio and take the video, conceptually that just wasn't, they just weren't there, right? It just was beyond them. And so that transition one makes when you move from an analog pedal board, even with some digital effects, for example, the Boss DD3, digital delay, no MIDI, but it's digital, right? But now all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, how do I get these things to do a bunch of different things? And again, the great thing about an HX Stomp or Helix or the GT1000 Core is that it enables you to do a bunch of stuff inside the editor on the surface of the device, or as I prefer, to work inside a deep editor on a computer. Here we go, the technology. Now, the interesting thing is you get to a certain point in age, and like you can't actually see 5-point font on the face of a unit, especially on a dimly lit stage, which is why, one, you better learn to be able to manipulate the things that you can actually need to change on a set, and two, you just need to know your way around, so that if you have to edit from one to the other, you know enough to do that. That said, getting back to our focal point of MIDI, generally speaking, and I think I've shared that here before, but I will just kind of give it an overview, is that one, is that if you think about the order that you're going to potentially connect your MIDI devices, that is to say, let's say I'm using GT1000 Core as the epicenter of my rig. And I'm just doing that because that was the first device that got mentioned MIDI-wise, I think. So the idea is that you take your MIDI cable, if that's basically what's telling your Timeline and your Big Sky what to do, that device is, you kind of put it as the first piece, if you will, in your MIDI signal chain, so you can keep mental track of the way you want that information to flow. That is to say, each one of those devices is going to have an appropriate MIDI channel number, up to 16. And so that GT1000 Core, MIDI channel 01. The Timeline, MIDI channel 02. The Big Sky, MIDI channel 03, or just MIDI channel 123, right? And the advantage of that is, if you think about the way you traditionally will run your effects, you kind of got your amp stuff, then you got your delays and your reverb. So, traditionally those are going to be coming in the signal chain after that. So the MIDI flow kind of following that same thing generally is the way you want to think about it. Um, and the other part of it is that, let's say that wasn't the case, you would still be taking the control device and, in my suggestion, putting that as MIDI channel 1. And then the next thing it's going to be telling what to do in some logical order, MIDI channel 2, MIDI channel 3. So once everything is on its own MIDI channel, you're able to send two main types of information that are going to be the most that you're going to mainly need to deal with. One that's just a program change. And the advantage of having different MIDI channels is I can say, hey, you know what, on patch number 1 and number 2 of the GT1000 core, I want the same delay over here. But when I go to patch number 3, I want you to go to patch 2, and then that's the timeline, and over on the big sky, I want you to go to patch 44. Now, arguably, one might organize their patches in such a way on those other devices such that everything kind of is closer in order, so you're not like, was that 44 or 41 that I liked? That is to say, if you could stick your favorite 5 patches as patch 1 through 5 and kind of had an idea, when I look over at my big sky, patch 1 through 5, patch 1, plate, patch 2, room, patch 3, hall, or my favorite version of those. So you kind of know, without even having to go there and mess with it, what those are. And it's a small enough number that you kind of go, I know what that is. So the point being is, by having those separate MIDI numbers, MIDI channels, you can tell each one of the devices specifically which patch to go to on a patch by patch basis from the controller. Now, in turn, what you're then able to do is the next level is CC, control changes, where, for example, on the GT1000 core, I can use kind of some, there are 3 switches, one of which I can, or all 3 of which I can assign some additional functions, or I can add an additional foot switch or expression pedal. Expression pedal actually being the best example. If you plug that in, then basically it's going to control the volume largely. If you plug it in right and use the right type of patch cable, it's generally going to it's just going to start controlling the volume. Not on all the patches, but I think just about all the patches that I use where I just kind of hooked up the expression pedal, just kind of worked on volume when you hooked it up in expression 1. But the idea is, let's say, for example, on my favorite patch inside the GT1000 core, there's a particular delay that I really like the sound of. And I want to be able to blend it in with the delay I've got on the timeline and the reverb I've got on the big sky. Well, then what you can do is you can assign that expression pedal to send a control change message, a CC message, to that delay inside this thing, where you can basically set it all the way up is basically the delay off, I should say the delay mix at 0, and all the way down is the delay mix to whatever number you want it to be. And those little control changes, I could send that same sort of control message through MIDI by targeting the MIDI channel 2 of the delay on the timeline, or MIDI channel 3 of the reverb on the big sky, and choose how much reverb maybe I want on the big sky, or choose how much delay I want on the timeline, or in this case, as I mentioned. And so those little control changes are really nice, because that's how, as Jeff from Boss mentioned, you just open the window up a little bit. And you think about, most importantly, what are the sorts of things that you want to know how to do, that you kind of like, I would like to have the ability to just be able to kind of go, here is a reasonable amount of delay, and here's more delay. But not so much you're like, oh, I'm swimming in it. So literally you can just kind of go, good, more, and just all the way down, all the way back. And so it's not dry, or if you wanted dry and wet, you could do that. But that is, a great example of the kind of layers of that. And like, I could describe it, I think, in a relatively straightforward way. And it's that sort of interactivity as you begin to build a pedal board of the sorts of things within the next 2 years you're going to probably want to know how to do. That's one of them. The other thing is this Airstep. This thing is basically a Bluetooth wireless controller that's got two expression jacks. It's got two relays for amps. It's got MIDI in. It's got two MIDI outs. It has basically, when I push this little switch here, it toggles between the different banks. And each one of those banks has multiple presets. I would say a device like that is going to be something that more and more of us are going to use. The reason being is that, first of all, more and more of the devices we're going to be using are not only going to have MIDI, but they're also going to have Bluetooth enabled. For example, obvious examples that come to mind are the LR Bags VoicePrint DI. They've got an iPhone app. Eventide. There's another company that I'm thinking of that I can't remember the name. But the point being is that ability to manipulate all that stuff from a controller. And, so here is another example. One of the things this enables me to do is when I'm doing a live stream, I can switch cameras. I can use it to maybe change pages on my iPad, although I don't actually, do that. That is to say, I believe in showing up on Sunday. I just know the songs because there are more things. Just me personally, there are more things that I need to be paying attention to than the iPad. The iPad is for me. If there's 5 stages of being a worship musician, I would say being in the iPad is somewhere between stage 1 and 2. That is to say, at stage 1, maybe you're just able. The only way you can make it through the service is with you just looking at the chart. You're not great at reading music and memorizing it. Totally get it. It's great to have that as a vehicle. Stage 2 is you're kind of like, I'm kind of getting there, but you know what? I want to feel confident, and the way that I need to feel confident is I just need. It's kind of like a I put it away. It's when they do scripts, teleprompter. It's kind, but it helps people just kind of go. I just want to make it through. I know people are depending on me, but at a certain point, you can begin to kind of go. I'm a support musician. I am an active part of the worship because I'm engaging people without it being weird. And then finally, I'm a leader. Like, if I don't know the chord change and somebody's playing the wrong chord, and I go, are you intending to play that chord? Notice the politically correct. Were you intending to play that chord? Which is really very nicely saying, there's no way that's the right chord. But I don't want to really be a jerk and make you feel like an idiot. It's just like, or the other, actually, like, what chord are you playing there? And you open up the dialogue and it's like, because I'm playing this, and then you begin to compare notes, and all of a sudden what you're able to do is help somebody out, and a leader humbly helps other people out. Right? Point being, is that the 5 stages of iPadetry. In any case, the ability to control the different things that we're going to need to control is going to be there, and of the different things we're going to control, I think are one of the lessons that we've learned in the past several months is that this technology is not going to go away anytime soon. I am fortunate enough to be working with an organization that I can't officially mention the relationship with, but it is a unison audio jamming remote control platform. So you basically, you can connect via video, but the audio flows through this particular proprietary server. And so the idea of getting your visuals and your home studio set up, I would say that in the next 2 years, kind of the next phase in the post-COVID thing is where worship teams begin to kind of go. When the bandwidth is there and the technology is there, can we rehearse at home? Do we have to go without dinner? Do we have to sit in traffic? Do we have to spend the time away from our families going to and fro? And in some instances, it's yes. Some instances, it's no. That is to say, if your church, for example, does not have a regular rehearsal facility, and you end up setting up in somebody's living room where there's no PA for the vocalists, it's not the right keyboard, it's not the right sound, it's not your guitar amp, it's not this, it's not that, where there's almost as many inconsistencies as there are consistencies, the ability to get everybody at home playing with their actual setup and getting it into the box and being able to interact musically, that's a powerful opportunity. That in the next 2 years, I think, is going to become part of it. So that means kind of getting a decent camera without having to spend a bunch of money. The interesting thing is, let's see if I can switch to it. Yeah, I can. There we go. That is the stock camera in my new computer. I'm just like, what? Like, yeah, I mean, it's like, and this isn't. I was a little orange there. For some reason, the blues make this thing turn orange. See, I can do it again. Hang on. Can't believe I'm actually trying to do it. But if I put this thing on, there we go. You see, it's starting to make me turn orange again. In any case, there you go, orange dude. So the idea of having your video and your home set up together is going to be it. Generally speaking, one of the things I'll be doing in the next several months is making some suggestions about mixers and audio interfaces. You don't have to spend a lot of money. The advantage of having a mixer is it enables you to kind of get everything all blended really nicely that's external of your computer. So that could be maybe a mic for your acoustic, a mic for your voice, the input from your piezo-driven acoustic guitar, and all that stuff kind of gets leveled and brought in there. The thing about your traditional audio interface is like it doesn't have faders on the top of it. So now all of a sudden you're kind of mixing inside the box. And without going too far down the rabbit trail, it is a non-PC friendly application, but Loopback is basically a virtual mixer for Mac, and there are things that are the equivalent for PC. But the short version is that once you bring an audio signal inside your computer, there are times that even if you mute the input, for example, I use Universal Audio stuff, and I've got basically a mixer that they call console that brings the audio signal in. I mute the input such that I can, if I want to. Well, I actually do. I have the speakers up here. I'm not having anything playing back, but if, for example, I were to go for a purposeful copyright claim and play a little Beach Boys, you would actually hear that playing through these speakers. So the point being is that once that signal's kind of inside the computer, it's a little bit harder to manage. So even though that microphone is muted inside that application, the signal is still passing through and you're hearing it because you're hearing it, and I can see the level there. So the challenge that we've got is that there is some of this stuff has a learning curve, and arguably the benefit is to be just give me a mixer, give me a USB out, and whatever I've got going into the mixer, whatever's coming out of the computer, it meets the mixer. I got headphones on, and I'm good to go. So I'll be doing some suggested home setups. Yes, they'll probably have some affiliate marketing pieces to them, but they'll also make a certain amount of sense because, like, hey, you know what? It's been interesting just kind of going. This is a new computer. And so in the process of kind of going into setting it up, I really just kind of went, let me set this up as if I didn't know anything. And I was like, I would be completely flabbergasted at how much I had to know. So the idea is like, okay, what is the stuff that people need to know to kind of take those first steps? And then once they've taken those first steps, what is the next body of information that they need to know, right? So the idea is making a decision. It's like, hey, looking ahead, mixer, audio interface. Many of these mixers you can use as an audio interface, and they have faders and whatnot. But the other thing about some of the audio interfaces is that there's a little bit less stuff in between you and the computer, which means that there's a little bit less, generally speaking, coloration, which is why you see a lot of musicians using audio interfaces and mixing stuff and levels inside the box. Let me just let me pause the thought there for just a moment. Athens, Georgia. Bruce is in the mix there. Oh my word. Oh, okay. Hold on. Oh boy. Uh, oh look at all of this. Thanks again, Bill. Really appreciate it. I like your photo, by the way. Uh, there we go. All right, good. To tell you the truth, I am a what I like about the Martin guitar. I like that it's got a cutaway, and I like the fact that they actually went with almost a Fender kind of a bolt-on neck style, and they just dared to actually. I think it was David that mentioned it before, which is they just kind of went, well, what if we didn't think like Martin, but we took what we know as Martin and try something different? And I love that. That guitar plays really well. So um, yeah, I'm really kind of ignorant on bracing, if I were to be really honest. Okay, so hopefully, David, that explanation was clear, and I will do a brief recap. Each one of the devices is like a cell phone. Let's imagine, and I don't know how old you are, but let's imagine you and I are brothers, and mom and dad just came home from the cell phone store, and I'm your older brother. I'm 15 and you're 14. Mom gives everyone in the family their own cell phone number. But we all want our own number because when my buddies are texting me, I don't want mom looking at the texts. You don't want mom looking at your texts. Hopefully, for good reason, but for privacy reasons. That's where the MIDI number is important. The program changes are just saying, hey, you over there, just change. When I hit this button to go to this other patch, you change to that patch number. Great. Then the CC messenger just saying, hey, you know what? I want to make a subtle change inside this one patch, and I want to control how much delay or reverb is happening by using an expression pedal or something like that. So you're literally controlling one thing. It's really cool. And that's really those the three layers you want to be conscious of. Yeah, it's that easy. Uh, okay. Good, good, good. I love the SC13E. It is a really pretty sounding guitar, but it is not the same as a traditional Martin. But they didn't really get harassed for it either. There we go. So Bruce, there we go. Bruce is on the case, so he's down there in the chat. Love that. Okay, good, 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 good. Oh, look at him go. Good, good, good. All right, good, good, good. There we go. Awesome. All right, Chris. Okay, takes a little soon. There we go. Oh, I remember you telling me about that, Chris. That's awesome. All right. Love that. All right. I love technology and loaded. My chiropractor is not happy. So I have an AC30 over there. It has three handles on the top. I mean, like, seriously, guys. All right. That's great, Chris. I remember you talking all about that and playing some of those. Yep, that was the whole thing. It was really cool. Uh, it's actually yes, that's awesome, Bruce. We should do an article on that guy. Um, Greer amps. Ooh, oh, that's great. I love it. Come on, there we go. Let's have some music humor. All right, let's see here. Up, wrong place. Let's see here, Brett. Uh, so Brett is making and I can't pull these in to the feed unfortunately, because of how we set stuff up for streaming. Hey Shane, what's going on, my man? Too much tech. I can't keep up with everything coming out. Still using the HD 500X. I love it. Keeping the faith. I had a nice hang on the phone the other night with Lincoln Brewster, and he was actually singing the praises of uh, the one that preceded that. He loved that model. We had a great conversation. Uh, GT100, I wouldn't use all the benefits of the new units. Sorry, let me read the whole thing. Brett, for my church and everyone I play at, I wouldn't benefit from upgrading from the GT100. I wouldn't use all the benefits of the new units, almost like a waste. The only thing I might use it to the fullest would be the CCX recording. I will have to do some research. Puts learning curve the newer units is quite steep uh, compared to the GT 1000 and or the 100. Um, I need to check out the GT 100 because the interesting thing is the snooty tech oriented person, like for example, just might go, oh well, maybe they're using some of the different sounds in there or something. But the reality is like, would I be able to tell the difference in the sounds blindfolded and tell you which one is which and say which one I liked better? Probably not. So the point being, I actually well here's the thing. GTE 100. Oh, it's got a dash. Everything from Boss has a dash. So, oh, that's a cute little board. Oh, I like that a lot. Ooh. No, that's nice and simple. So, oh, okay. Got it. All right. All right. Got it. All right. So, let me back up a step. Form factor. So, that's the interesting thing is you recognize these things. So, I used a GT6, a GT8, a GT10, and the GT100. I actually think I might have a GT100. I do have the GT1000 and the GT1000 core, but that is kind of their older form factor, which worked and works great. The sounds are great. I used the GT6 to record basically all the lead tones on my last record a decade ago. It's like, yes, the technology's gotten better, but it's just like I put that on every so often. I'm like, I'm not embarrassed for the sounds. It's just it's better, but can you hear the difference, especially in the framework of a mix? No. So what's neat about those is you've got all the various foot switches. You can go into stomp mode. It's great piece of gear. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, Bruce is in here. Few mention this, but MIDI was also used to control the home kitchen devices, your toaster and microwave. Interesting. So like, and so you just kind of have an air step in there. It's like, all right, there's my toast, and there's my. Yeah, that's kind of funny. I think I've heard that before, but I had forgotten. I would love to see that in a rig rundown. From the Miku pedal to the MIDI controller, which connects to the Sunbeam, and I get there we go, fresh toast every other song. That's great. All right, folks, I have to drop off a piece of gear, uh, and so that is going to facilitate. Starts is something my phone types in every time. Laugh out loud. Hold on. Okay, totally irrelevant. Okay, got it. All right, got it. All right. First of all, always a pleasure. Want to invite you to a couple of things. If you're not on the worship musician email list, want to tell you so you know. Believe in Music Week is next week, and unlike the traditional NAM show, it is NAM has been increasingly opening this thing up for worship musicians, but it's a online NAM show called again Believe in Music Week, and it's happening next week. And we are doing something, two things. Somebody asked about the tech track. So I'm hosting that it's already been shot, but it'll be kind of going live in the order of the shows. This thing about basically the COVID-19 pivot and how it's impacted war, how it's impacted basically technology and creativity. And it's actually a really neat section. And I'm basically interviewing Chris Griffin from Church of the Highlands, who did the growth track, and I went down there and watched them shoot their Christmas show, and it was amazing what they're able to do. Also, Christian Ponsford from Multitracks, and Todd, whose last name I'm completely blanking on. I want to call him Todd Fields, Todd Elliott Thank you. From Philo or Philo.org, which is basically the Philo conference, first in last out, which is for techs, as he calls them, technical artists, which I absolutely love because these days, when you think about all the things that happen downstream from those of us that are actually making the music, there are a lot of really cool things that happen in terms of, and this isn't going to be anything particularly. I think I'm going to the right camera. There we no. Like I said, it wasn't particularly artistic, but imagine that that was the. Hang on, I can make this work. All right, so now we've got our. Let's see. There we go. Our bass player down the neck shot, right? Then we got the guitar player. Oh, there's the front bass player, and then there's the other shot. So somewhere in the midst of that, besides being completely absurd, is the idea is that if you set those things up well, and you can do so with some interesting creativity. And I'm going to show you a little trick here. Hang on a second, just for grins and giggles. So I'm going to duplicate this scene here, and so I'm over here in this scene, and then I'm going to go into this one, and I think it will just allow me to track this down through here like this and like this. There we go. And what I'm going to do is in this scene, and this is with this application called Ecamm Live, and what I'm going to do is I'm now zoomed and I've done this. So imagine that's that scene, and this is this one. So in other words, I've got the pastor, whoever it is, or the worship leader, kind of playing. And let's see, let me go a little. So I'm zoomed all the way out. Let's zoom in tighter here. So now the neat thing is that is literally just one camera, and I'm just kind of going like this, boom, 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 and that transition like that. You don't necessarily know that that's a digital zoom on one camera, but what it does do is it makes it like, as opposed to like an hour of blah, 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 you can now every so often kind of with a natural pause and blah, blah, blah. And the other thing about that is if you're really crafting, you're pre-shooting your service, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, that gets me to the end of my first point. And then you just notice where your hands are at. And that gets me to the end of my first point. Right? You just remember that you're kind of here, and then you go to the other camera. So, and you kind of go, just remember where you were. And so the blah, 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 and that, really gets me to the end of my second point. Edit, blah, 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 blah. So, you can find the way to do that. And generally, I wouldn't have hands up. It's just a matter of like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And, hands on podium, blah, blah, blah. And the neat thing is then when you do kind of an edit like that, you don't necessarily notice it. Like if my head shifted, just, let's say, okay, watch this. And I go back to there. You won't have noticed if my head shifted between those two shots because of the edit. And so the neat thing is that's using the technology and setting those up, and you kind of make a couple of notes where you're going to gently shift between them because you don't want to be doing, sorry for this. Or it wouldn't even let me switch it that fast. It was like, no, I'm not going to let you do it. You don't want to do like the strobe thing for people. You don't want it to be distracting. In any case, I digress. That particular section is really cool. And Todd, his whole point about technical artists, I really love that he used that phrase, because increasingly the people doing our video are going to be doing more and more to make our presentation, because we're going to continue to stream, the majority of us, and making that an exciting and it's not hard to make it look good. You just got to kind of know what to do. So in any case, all right. So with that said, looking forward to digging in. I didn't really talk about the camera side of things. I think what's going to happen, sorry, when I talked about the things that the musicians, as I wrap up here, are going to need to know per this new camera. And again, this is the stock camera in this machine, and I can change the colors here a little bit and change the gamma and make, and I can actually do a lot to make these two cameras. Not like that. I can do a fair amount. It's 2 and 4. I can make this guy look a little more red. And I can make him look close enough that you might not necessarily recognize the difference between the two. And more importantly, the idea is to make it such that they're close enough that you don't notice the difference between the two. But the ability to have a different angle that you can kind of cut to and all of that, it's nice. So, but that was the built-in camera on this computer, and getting a lot better. All right, Lord, just give thanks for the opportunity to get together in fellowship and friendship and just have this time together. I just pray that everybody is safe under your covering. I just am grateful that we have this time together. And Lord, I just pray that in our lives we are a reflection of you in a world that really needs a lot more of you right now. And I just pray that we are an encouragement to those of us, those that are around us who are needing encouragement. We are the voice of clarity in a world that is needing clarity, and that we are we are leading where we need to lead, and we are being judicious about the time and the day that we're and age that we're in, and looking to the future, Lord, looking for what you want from us in this season, that we can serve you humbly and obediently and judiciously. And Lord, we just lift up our leaders, Lord. We just pray that your wisdom gets in the grooves, that they don't lead out of opinion, they don't lead out of worldly knowledge, they don't lead out of books other than the Bible. Lord, we just pray that there is an overcoming of faith and revival in the leaders in this country, and that your word would be heard above all others. We ask all of this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. I never talk about politics, so I'm not going political. I'm just saying right now we need to be praying for everyone that's leading, because that's what we do. And it is a tough time. We are called to be the voice of grace. We are called to be the voice of compassion. We are called to put shoes on the feet of the homeless, provide the widows with the opportunity to feel that they are not alone in their plight. And I'm sure there are people that are on the stream tonight that are feeling alone. So I just give thanks that we can come together in fellowship. And I just pray that in our differences, that we find the opportunity to love and respect the differences that God put in us, so we can appreciate the uniqueness of what God has done through us. And so, Lord, I just pray that we find the voice of unity in Jesus to do whatever it is that God wants us to do in this time, in this season. So we ask all of this in Jesus' mighty name. All right. Thanks, Rick. I saw a message come in there from Bruce. I do also want to remind everybody that we're going to be doing an event with Lincoln Brewster as well, called the Worship Musician Chapel, and there will be, I think we've got a show before that goes on. So just really want to thank all of you. You know, it's a tough time right now, and I just really want to encourage people to just remember that God's large and in charge. He sees all of this, and he just knows that we just have to be faithful and in prayer, and believing that God is going to do what only he can do, and it's not up to men, it's not up to us. We just need to actually really just kind of make sure that we're mindful of, like, Lord, we'll put our faith in you. I hope that reaches somebody that, and it stirs something in your heart, because these are It's a hard time right now, and there are no easy answers. But there's one awesome God who does his part every time, and that's the easy part. All right. Love each of you. God bless. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.